Of Monday, March 28th. I'd like to ask that you rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic. Thank you. Are there any changes to the order of the agenda? My fellow council members? No? Staff have any changes?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, is there anyone here from the public that would like to ask or like to change the agenda? Okay, seeing none, next item on our agenda this evening is council reports. Don, do you want to start?
Yes, just one thing I'd like to bring to the public's attention, and that is that the combination of SAMCEDA, which is the San Mateo County Economic Development Association, and the Peninsula Partnership, otherwise known as P3, has recently received an award from the San Francisco Business Times. And these awards are the type of things that are, they give, the biggest real estate deal of the year, the biggest this, the biggest that. In this particular case, the Peninsula Policy Partnership and SAMCEDA received the award of the biggest steal of the year for a real estate deal. And what they really mean by that is this is a deal that never should have come here. And the specifics of it is the recruitment of Virgin America to the Peninsula as their new headquarters, and for all the hard work that went into that. And I guess I bring this up because this is something that San Carlos has historically supported, and we've actually cut back a tweak just because of for budgetary reasons. Some cities have not supported this, and I think this is a perfect example of something that in the end the entire peninsula benefits from. Certainly we do, in terms of the economic vitality of the county and the vibrancy, and for the relatively small contribution that we make. This is a perfectly good example of why it's worthwhile.
Is that it, Don?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Mike, do you have anything?
Yes, Tom and I met with the Athletic Council last Thursday, and an item, I'll share it with Tom, came up.
I'm sorry, just for clarification, that's the Athletic Turf Subcommittee that's been formed, the Citizens Committee?
The Citizens Advisory Committee, Evaluation of Athletic Fields, Use, Needs, and Possible Solutions.
Okay, thank you.
Formal
An
name.
acronym for that?
Tom, you
The
named it.
acronym is Fields Committee.
Fields Committee.
Okay.
And the question arose, was it the desire of this body to have that group report directly to this committee, directly to the council, or report through the Park and Recreation Department, let them make the modifications or whatever the report would be, and then that report would come to us?
To the commission.
To the commission, yeah.
I think the preference of the committee is that they work closely as they go through the process, reporting into the commission. The commission has an opportunity to review and to comment and send it back for further consideration to the committee. But ultimately, the committee would finish its work and present the report to the council. The committee sees them, their group, as being appointed by the council, which we did, and therefore the report would come from them to the council.
I think that's right, because of the nature of the beast here. We're talking about things that directly involve the Park and Rec Commission, and they do need to be involved. However, for a final report, they should, in fact, report back to the council, since we did, in fact, appoint them. That's exactly well stated.
I believe that is the preference of the committee as well.
That is the preference of the committee, and that's what Tom and I recommended. Right. And said we would report to this body to ensure that we had we all have the same opinion.
Right.
Matt, do you have any difference of opinion, or?
No.
Okay.
What's being said?
Yeah, I
we'll
would
report back.
Yeah, I would just add too. We do have 2 members of our Parks and Rec Commission on that committee, right?
Right.
And so I would imagine that as they move through the process, that the Parks and Rec Commission will be getting feedback, just like we'll be getting reports back from our 2 council members sitting on that committee. Right. So I think, is that enough direction?
In light of that, then I'll report quickly that Mr. Davis chaired the committee and went very, actually I thought went very organized, and we got a presentation on the status of the parks. Ground rules were established. It's a 2-hour meeting. We're going to meet twice a month.
Wow, wonderful.
The first and third Thursday of the month.
Okay. Mike, did you have anything else? Okay. Tom?
No, that's it.
Okay. Matt?
I just have one item. We all received in our packet, our council mail, I believe, a memo from the city attorney, and it's based on a question that I asked regarding the reimbursements for expenses for mileage and so forth. Bob does say at the end of his memo that he would leave it up to the city manager or the council if we wanted to see any changes to that. And so I would like to ask that we agendize this memo for a future council meeting.
Actually, I was going to ask our city manager, Mike Garvey, to come up and just speak to actually this memo, as well as the there was a memo that was issued also by our city attorney, Bob Lanzone, regarding the question of the legality of contract consultants signing city contracts. So, Mike, do you want to take a minute?
Yes, Madam Mayor. The memo talks about reimbursements that were made, despite the fact that reimbursements are not typically. What I wanted to make clear was that Macari Engineering is entitled to such, would be entitled to such reimbursements prior approval, my approval. In the case of the charges detailed in the city attorney memo, all of those expenditures, I did approve all of them in advance. One was one was for attendance at the City County Engineers Association meetings. I had representatives of ME attend that to represent the city. I asked them to attend, and in fact, at that meeting, they were able to do work that transfer bicycle grants, made groundwork for the bikeway grant. The second was a meeting of Sam Cita, one single meeting. That one I board and appropriate representative. And then the third was over a 3-year period, certain inspections that were done. Normally, our construction ongoing project. Now and again, we have a project require inspect. I therefore ask that part-time engineers for the city do those inspections of the project. I had agreed in advance. Well, what I said, I give you the same treatment as city employees. Except in the third case, the inspection gave the approval in advance. I also noted the city engineer included one of the copy of one of the billings. It's a typical billing that comes in. You'll note that I signed that in approving. So I gave prior approval, and I also didn't sign all of these.
And just in summary, I mean, we're talking about a total of $987.67 since all of the contracts through 2001. So, I mean, I'll ask my fellow council members if this is indeed something you'd like to have come back on a future agenda, or if you're comfortable with the city manager or one of his delegates continuing to sign off on authorization. And I would assume that it wouldn't just apply to Macari Engineering, but to all of our contract employees as well, about the types of expenses that they would be allowed to submit for reimbursement.
So the alternative would be to amend the contracts to mention basically each and every reimbursable that might come our way.
Well, that may be an option, or to put in a lump sum or something that would be used in lieu of reimbursements. But to me, I mean, I'm looking at this $987 doesn't seem like a lot over 4 years, actually 3 years, and I don't. It may be that we're making a mountain out of a molehill here.
Madam Mayor, I'm less concerned about the dollar amount, although I think it's the principle of the thing as opposed to the dollar amount. $1,000 times how many times it would be done potentially is still city and public money. So there's a principle here more than the dollars itself. From what the city manager has just said, he indicated that these reimbursements were done specifically for city business. They're done as if it were a city employee. They were done judiciously. They were done, certainly with care, and certainly that privilege has not been abused. I'm frankly comfortable with the action that the city manager has taken and his explanation for it here in arrears.
Okay, I guess rather than maybe debating the point at this meeting, since it has not been put on the agenda, actually as a discussion item, my question is really more, do we want to bring it back to put it on the agenda or not, just from a general policy standpoint? And Don, it sounds like from what you're saying,
I don't see a need.
You don't see a need.
Nor do
Yes.
I.
Okay.
Now, back to the person who asked it, I still would like to see it on the agenda, and for the reason that Don stated, you're all correct. We're talking $987 over a 3-year period. But we're also talking about a principle. We're not talking about Mr. Garvey personally and what he approved and didn't approve. We're talking about anybody who happens to be the city manager at any time and what kind of policy do we want to have in place. There is more here than simply reimbursement of incidentals, which, again, my belief is if we're going to have contractors and they're going to do work and they want to be reimbursed for incidentals, they should simply state it in their contract. But beyond that is also this statement that's made by the city attorney, which says the city manager has traditionally had authority on matters under $20,000 to approve contracts, amendments to contracts, and settle claims. And I believe we've upped that amount to $50,000. I think there's enough here. My point is that there's enough here to put it on the agenda and have some discussion. I don't want to go into detail tonight and ask a lot of questions and have discussion because it's not on the agenda. But I would like to have it on the agenda, and that's a simple request.
Okay. So I heard,
All right. On the agenda.
do you want it on the agenda?
Thank you.
Okay. Mike, the next one on the question, the legality of contract consultants signing city contracts and the opinion of our city attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The legal opinion states that state law, the mayor signed a contract. The city council is empowered to delegate staff to sign those contracts. You haven't certain delegate that to the and so delegate that signing certain contracts to the finance director. I think, therefore, the opinion clearly states that yes, Carlos, finance director is authorized to execute certain contracts. However, I think that the question, as I remember, is a slightly different one. That Burkhardt had brought up a thought from a citizen who works for the state, and she had said that state contracts are not up to execute contracts. The question, if I remember correctly, Councilman Burkhardt can correct me if I'm wrong, the question was, do we have I think the opinion today are following policy act that is established. So, the other question is whether or not you wish to amend that not allow contract employees to execute contracts. I'll also tell you that aside from that specific delegation finance director, we do not typically have contract employees signing contracts. Contracts signed by the planning director or by the director of work are not the final signing. I have them sign before I see it, and I review it, and I execute those contracts for the assistant in my absence, and that has been the administrative policy in the city for so long as I've been there. That completes the report.
If I may clarify, Mike, and you have stated it pretty much the way I had the question put. I asked the question. I'll wait for that. I did ask the question because it was brought to me by a citizen who is an attorney and works for the state of California and identified the situation to me that state employees and then, well, actually contractors, people who contract with the state cannot sign contracts. And when I was reading through our municipal code and looking at that, it brought that question to mind, and I asked it simply to make sure that our city attorney looked it over and reviewed it, and to make sure that we were in compliance with the law and everything was fine. I wasn't asking for staff to consider changing policy or rewriting policy or any of those kinds of things. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mike? Great. Thank you very much, Mike. Continuing on under council reports, I just have actually a couple of things. First of all, as all of my council members know, in the last month or so, we have been meeting with Richard Perry, who is a management consultant, who is doing the recruiting for our city manager. And all the 5 council members were interviewed, and they're putting together a brochure which should be going out in the next month or so. It looks like at this time it's going to take longer than the anticipated sort of end of May, which was Mike's initial sort of target date for when he would like to leave, to find or to identify a replacement city manager, and wanted to just see if my fellow council members would be supportive of me working with Mike to sort of extend his date to a date sometime, maybe end of June, sort of July timeframe, that may help bridge the time between when he had initially thought that he might like to move on to the date when we might have a new city manager on board. And part of this is because, Mike obviously is looking at other opportunities in pursuing his next endeavor or next career, and he'd like to have some level of certainty as to how long the city would like to have him. And I think that given his tenure with the city and all that he's done for the city, that we need to respect that, and we should be able to work and to say, here's a good date. So is that something that...
I think so. You would report back to council after...
Yeah, absolutely. And I would look at it that it would be council asking Mike to stay on past that time, because I think, it's really in both best interests, and a win-win for both Mike as well as for us as a city in terms of moving us smoothly through this transition.
I would ask for one thing, which was not in the original letter of resignation, which is a specific date. I think Mike stated sometime in May, without putting a specific date on it. And if we're going to talk about extending it, I would like to see it put to a certain date that is specific. I do think we have, the services of Brian Moore, the assistant city manager. He's very able to carry us through if it extends out much further than, sometime in June or whatever you come up with.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask that it is a date specific.
Well, absolutely, and that was really the whole conversation, because Mike and I have been having conversations about this, and until we got information back from the recruiter, we didn't really have any idea about how long the process was going to take or should take. I mean, there's no guarantees that come August 1st that we'll have identified a suitable candidate to take over as city manager, but in the meantime, I don't think it's fair to leave Mike sort of hanging to, and potentially missing out on some of his opportunities because of the loyalty he does feel to the city and to San Carlos. So, okay, very good. Mike?
Sorry, Mr. Madam.
Mike, would you mind lifting the microphone up? Thanks. You're not projecting very well this evening.
I'm not very good at passivity, so excuse me. What I do want to say is that I want the council to know the nature of the conversations that the mayor and I have been having. I am in negotiations with some folks. The dates have not firmed up, and therefore, at this point, they're quite open. As that gets more serious, then I wanted some idea of how long I could wait, because, as you know, I was prepared to move on, but I do not intend to leave the city in the third. It is taking longer than we had anticipated. We hope that within sometime this week you'll be getting a draft of the brochure. I won't be seeing that, but you will. It'll come in the form of email, and you'll be asked to respond quite quickly. Get the brochure out next week. The first of the ads comes out for the process. So it's moving along, but it is a fairly slow process. what I'm looking for is some predictability. I can't stay, I certainly can't stay in September or October, but I'll be as flexible as I can.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. One other quick item is that this Saturday, April 2nd, actually, I'm thrilled to be able to oversee the groundbreaking ceremony of Arguello Park, which is the last in our park renovations, major park renovations here in San Carlos. Joe Simidian, our Senator Joe Simidian, will be on hand because he was quite instrumental in helping to secure some additional funding for that park. So for those who are interested, please come out and join us Saturday, April 2nd at 10 a.m. It should be a wonderful day, and it will be a wonderful kickoff, I think, to a nice project here in San Carlos. Okay. One other thing Matt reminded me to report on is prior to this meeting, we actually did have a joint meeting with our City Council and Parks and Recreation Commission. We had a speaker who came and talked to us about the idea of putting together some ways of developing some funds in terms of fundraising here in San Carlos for the purpose of our recreation facilities, our youth center, our senior center, but not from the standpoint of the city government driving this. It's actually more along the ideas of developing a foundation or a 501c3 here in the city that would be entirely autonomous from the city council. It would be entirely autonomous from a city government that would be responsible for not only providing some levels of funding, but also for developing endowments and some other types of giving programs for the facilities and the parks within San Carlos. And I thought we had general consensus and general support from our Parks and Rec commissioners that that's probably something that they're going to be going through and trying to figure out if there's a way that they can actually start to put that together. The fellow's name was Bill Kogler from Kogler Consulting, and I'm sure that we'll be hearing more about that in the future from our Parks and Rec staff as well as our Parks and Rec Commission. If there's no more council reports? Okay. The next item tonight is a presentation, and actually this is quite an honor for San Carlos. We were the recipient of 4 awards at the California Park and Recreation Society's awards, and here to present them tonight is the new president that Barry passed the gavel to not so long ago, about a month ago, Sheila Kansian. So,
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Sheila Kansian. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation for your neighbor to the north, City of San Mateo. But I'm really here tonight in my other capacity as the new president of California Park and Recreation Society. Certainly, as Mayor Doherty alluded to, I have really the privilege of following what I think is one of our more outstanding presidents in the State Society, and that's Barry Weiss. We had our awards and installations banquet 2 weeks ago, and there was nothing but accolades for the wonderful job that Barry has done last year. So he by far is probably one of the most ardent supporters and cheerleaders for Parks and Recreation than you'll ever find. So I'm very pleased to be following him in the tenure of president, but I'm very pleased tonight to be able to present the City of San Carlos with 4 awards that were received at the Awards and Installations Banquet on March 12th. And actually, San Carlos was one of only several cities that received multiple awards. This is a very competitive process. There were over 250 award proposals that were submitted from 48 agencies, and only 32 awards of excellence, 7 Champions of the Community Awards, and 32 Achievement Awards were granted. And so for the City of San Carlos to walk away with 4 of those certainly attests to the wonderful programs that you have here in the City of San Carlos. So I'd like to present the awards and acknowledge those staff members and citizens from your community that were part of that. The first, absolutely. First is an award of excellence under the economic development category for the Young Consumer Program. This was a program that was jointly sponsored with your Chamber of Commerce, and so I'd like to acknowledge from the staff perspective, Jerry Fujimoto, your Youth Development Supervisor. From the Youth Advisory Council, Jillian Holden, Chair, Rick Carpenter, Vice Chair, and Catherine Kwan. And from the Chamber, Cheryl Pomerank, Chamber CEO, and Jim Fanistock from the Chamber of Commerce as well. So congratulations on this award. The second award was also an award of excellence in the health and wellness category. This was Project Healthy Teen, which was a program that promoted healthy eating habits and lifestyles for teens in San Carlos and on the peninsula. And accepting and acknowledging for staff is Kari Ferguson, your Youth Development Coordinator. The third award was a Champion of the Community Award. This was really an award that honors non-professionals. And in this case, you have the distinction of honoring your service clubs in town. So the San Carlos Kiwanis, the San Carlos Lions, the Rotary Service Clubs for the Caring Cupboard program for senior. And those members of the service clubs that we would like to mention are Jim Stevens from the Rotary Club, Kay Burton and Jerry Cristoni from the Kiwanis Club, Frank Cotarucci and Sam Nervino from the Lions Club, and then from staff, Joan Province, Program Coordinator, and Jean Archibald, Interim Senior Center Director. Congratulations. And finally, a Certificate Achievement Award for Best Activity Guide for fall of 2004, acknowledging your work in your Park and Recreation Activity Guide, acknowledging for staff is Kathy Giroux, Recreation Supervisor, and Lynn Hilferty, Graphic Designer. So congratulations. I know that there were a number of staff who were present on March 12th, including Mayor Doherty and Mike Garvey, and so, again, it's a real testament to your programs and services in San Carlos that you're acknowledged. Again, congratulations.
I think these awards highlight how conscious all the staff are of a couple things. One, that we're here to serve the community, and two, that we're here to be a partner with the community. And while you see in all the pieces of literature we have of creating community through people, parks, and programs, you can tell that it's something that we absolutely believe in down to our core, that that's why we're here. We're here to create community. I think the fact that we have all these community members that are in the audience and really make a lot of these programs possible is great testimony to that. And at this point, I'd like to also take the opportunity to thank the wonderfully talented professional staff that we have in Parks and Recreation and thank them for all that they do for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments, Barry. Thank you, Sheila, for coming to present the awards again, a second time here. And again, also thank you to all the volunteers and all of the professionals and staff here in San Carlos that really do make our programs, both in Parks and Rec as well as other programs, very special and very much part of the City of Good Living. So thank you again. Next item is public comments. This is a 10-minute maximum period of time. There will be a public comment period at the end of tonight's meeting for those if we do run over. This is for people who would like to address the City Council on items not on the posted agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 2 minutes. However, if you feel like you need to talk longer than 2 minutes, you're more than welcome to follow at the public comment period at the end of the meeting. I do have speaker slips this evening from 4 members of the public. So first off, Joe Vitangeli, followed by Wayne Thompson. Please feel free to come up to the podium. And for the record, if you could just say your name and city of residence, please, that would be wonderful.
Joe Vitangeli, San Carlos.
You know, I'm going to ask, could you pull the microphone down a little bit and talk into it? Otherwise, it's difficult for us.
Joe Vitangeli from San Carlos.
Thank you.
I'm here to talk about the scoop that went down to defeat. Paying me that this jewel that we city had serves down. I understand, though, also the opposition came up our side of dating one of the most important things, but the fact that the riders paid nothing. I don't want to see this idea die just because it cost them a lot. I think if we approach this in three standpoints, riders actually had to pay a meaningful fee, ride, reduce the property tax, and reduce the service. I think we could still come up with something that really served the community in the long run until 2009, when the Proposition A would take over the funding of schools.
Thank you very much, Joe. Wayne Thompson?
Yes, my name is Wayne Thompson. I'm a resident of Redwood City. I'm an electrical contractor. I recently did some work in your city, and I was judged by a code that I believe the city of San Carlos has adopted illegally in violation of state law. I contacted your chief building official, Mr. Jack Aiello. I sent him an email, and I told him that you can't use this code until the state approves it, and they haven't approved it yet. He sent me an email back and said he believed he could use it. He had the city attorney's opinion that he could use it. And so after that, I contacted the state office in Sacramento, the building commission. They're the people that make up all the codes and rules that the cities and counties have to obey. They sent Mr. Aiello, and they sent me a copy of it, a detailed 2-page letter that goes into painstaking detail explaining that he is in violation of state law by using the particular code that he's using here in San Carlos. All the other cities around here are using the correct one, but San Carlos isn't. And the code that he quoted me in his email saying that he believed this allowed him to do it, they also addressed that and told him that there is a precedent-setting court case. It's already been decided. And so that's what I've come to you tonight for. They sent him this letter. They sent me a copy of it. He's ignored it. He's still using this code. It hit me where it hurt the most, in the wallet. And I'm just one contractor. This affects every contractor that's done work in your city.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thompson, could I ask that you provide your contact information with our city manager, Mike Garvey, and we'll ask him to look into it and also refer it to our city attorney as well, and we'll hopefully get to the bottom of this sooner rather than later. But thank you very much for bringing this to our attention.
I've got 6 copies, so...
You're welcome to bring them up here, or I'm sure that they'll get copies to us as well. Okay, thank you very much. Andre Carpier, please, is next on the agenda.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is André Carpio. I'm from Emeryville by train. It was quite a trip. Anyway, I come to talk about solar. Something there is. It's a quote in French. This is the basics of judicial. And the dispute, as it has been said to me, resolve about. Well, I want to give 2 examples on 1,000. In 2000, excuse me, there was an accident. The sponsor who gave $1,000 got injured. Demonstrate. C'est respondant. Expecting sued, but for some reason, in second is when there was a mix-up in the books, and the IRS fined $10,000 penalty, and were named the person quickly dissolve the salt. I don't know if it's a way to be slick like we, but the remain person who was to pay owner to the IRS because they want to take my car, and my not anyone. So there is 2 examples, as I said, and the difficulty in corresponding such has been a grievance, but I'll be happy to answer any question, anyone in writing. Do that. I'll question that may not be relevant. Going to satisfy your curiosity. Well,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Mayor Doherty,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I would like to ask a question.
Actually,
Not of him, but of staff on this.
you know what? You can ask for follow-up, but not necessarily.
That's what I wanted to ask is which of our staff understands this case, because we get letters handwritten by this gentleman. He's been to us, I think this is his 3rd visit. I would like to understand what the situation is, and I want to know who on staff understands this case that I could sit and meet with and have them go over it.
Matt, I think, well,
The matter was referred to the police department, and they are handling it. We'd like to get a report from them for council. And,
yeah,
follow up as you see fit.
okay. Actually, per our
And-
policy, Matt, questions really should be referred through the city manager's office instead of going directly to staff. But I'm sure Mike will look into it. I know we've certainly received the letters from this gentleman, and I'm sure that this entire council shares the sentiment of we'd like to get this resolved for this gentleman so that he can have it. Jeff, I'm sure, Jeff, you'll communicate. Okay. Thank you. Clint Miller, followed by Marilyn Malberg.
Clint Miller, 20. I would simply like to clarify a point, have it in the public record.
Sorry, we're having technical difficulties.
Second mic.
My understanding is the bid for microphones is out now. So hopefully within the next couple of months we will have
Okay, well, that sounds better. I can hear myself.
a new sound system and better audio.
Okay, Clint Miller, 2429 San Carlos Avenue. I would like to get clarification on a point and have it in the public record. Specifically, I'm referring to the construction management contract on Arguello Park. At the February 28th meeting, a memo was given saying that staff will perform inspection and contract administration. The council was asked who actually got this contract. We have not got a definitive answer. I did ask Barry Weiss this question. He said that Mukhtari Engineering got the contract. I would like to know on the public record who got this contract and what the amount is it for, what the amount for the contract is.
I'm seeing staff coming up to the podium. Brian, our Assistant City Manager, Brian Moore.
Yes, Mayor and members of council, after the last meeting, I asked Mr. Mukhtari about this question. My understanding is the day-to-day inspection on this project will be done by Vin, who is a member of the city staff, so that will be covered by his salary. The supervision of Vin, of course, is done by Mr. Mukhtari, which is part of his retainer, so there's no additional cost there. However, there will be some construction management done by Bob Epler, who's a senior engineer with Mukhtari Engineering, and the estimated cost of that is $9,000. So at the current time, staff's estimate is $9,000 for all that work.
Okay.
Thank you. I would like to state, I have in the past, that I have a couple of problems. One, conflict, I've talked about this before, but it's my opinion that a contractor, public official, should not advise the council how to vote on a matter to which he will financially benefit, and that's what the memo says here. He recommends that the council vote for this. Number two, I have a problem with the stealth manner in which this was done. And also, I was told at a previous meeting when we were discussing the industrial road construction management contract, I was specifically told when asked that we were not going to engage in this practice in the future, that there were no foreseeable construction management contracts that were going to occur. And since then, we've seen the White Oaks flood control, and we have seen the El Camino median removal that Mukhtari has gotten contracts on. Now, I am pleased to see that this is minimal, because the figures were going around town was like it was a $100,000 contract. But those are my concerns.
Okay. Thank you very much. Marilyn Malberg.
Giving Councillor and City Councils, the agenda that I would like to do this evening is pertaining to Scoot, and especially the elderly. It very disturbs me. Very many people that cannot get around. And the gentleman that just spoke, pertaining to, is called serendipity. And if we could come with something else on a contract, most of them are on a fixed income, and it's very hard and they pay taxes because they own houses. And I'm speaking on their behalf. There's people with walkers. They can hardly get on Scoot. And your Scoot is a wonderful, wonderful. They take them to get groceries, they take them to doctor's appointments. And with Victoria Risotho, I have a petition. If we can keep Scoot there. I am a resident of St. Carlos. You could just try and put this on. I have 34 people on a petition that need your help.
Thank you for coming and addressing you. I think we were all very disappointed with the election results as it related to Scoot. However, we are continuing to look at alternatives for funding, and I've actually asked staff to prepare a report back to this council on a future agenda with maybe some alternatives for trying to fund that. So we certainly appreciate your work in putting together the petition and coming to us this evening, and we'll see what we can do.
I appreciate it. Try to help the elderly.
Okay. Thank you very much.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wants to speak under public comment? Next item on our agenda, this evening is the approval of our consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. I did want, for clarification, to note that item 6G, which is actually related to the Scoot election, is simply a resolution which accepts the certificate of the chief elections officers and declaring the statement of votes. So it's not necessarily speaking to the Scoot program specifically. It's really more certifying the election, the special election that was held on March 8th of 2005. So, having said that, are there any, my fellow council members, do you want to remove any item for discussion?
I have a further question to that, if this would be the time to ask.
Certainly.
The resolution doesn't give the yes and no's. It does for the absentee votes, but not for the total. Is that intended to be that way, Christine, or do we get some other follow-up report as to the total official yes and no?
The total, let me look at my copy here. No, that's a typo. But on number 2, the total number of votes cast in the city was 7637.
Right. But is there any reference that I'm missing to the total yes and total no in the resolution, or does the resolution need to include total yes and total no?
He's talking, this is
Oh, okay.
absentee only.
That's absentee only. Yeah, if you look at the table on the back of Warren Slocum's chart, it gives all the statistics by precinct with absentees, yes and no, and ballots cast, yes and no.
So this is accepting the certificate of the county clerk, which is the attachment, correct? So the resolution accepts the certificate that Warren Slocum put together. So I was under the assumption that that makes it part of the record.
I think you're right. I didn't pay much attention to that first line.
Okay.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any member of staff that would like to have any item removed?
No, Madam Mayor.
Any member of the public that would like to have any item removed? Okay, Matt, did you?
Yeah, sorry, items 6H and I.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion for approval of consent calendar items 6A through G.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Christine, would you call the question, please?
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Mayor Doherty?
Yes.
Bill Doherty.
Okay, Matt, 6H, an acceptance of Measure A half-cent sales tax report.
Thank you, Richard. I had a couple of questions regarding the report. The first one is how much are we estimating the savings in '05 to be? It talks about the change in service contract with Serendipity from the previous.
Matt,
yes.
I'm sorry, do you want to reference where you're referring to? It's on the second page under
Sure.
expenditures, is that right?
Right. So it's the third bullet item, I believe.
If I understand the question correctly, we had a savings, substantial savings. I believe it was several $100,000 in our contract. We have made, the council has approved 2 appropriations from those savings to date. Even with the over-expenditure for last year in this fund, we should still have, I have not done the calculation, but I would assume somewhere in excess of $50,000 to the good.
So Richard, if you can remind the council then, we had a budget item when we approved the budget, when we did the adjusted budget and so forth, for this whole category that includes the Scoot program. And then we contracted with Serendipity and we saw savings from where we had a budget item?
That's correct. And we did not go back to the council, and the council did not adjust the budget after that contract. But subsequent events, the council has appropriated funds from those savings in order to fund 2 other items, and I
For instance, the $85,000 that we appropriated last council meeting for bike lanes.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's one of them. The other, I believe, was $45,000, but I wasn't prepared for that question, so I don't have that answer right now.
Okay. And question 2 is, have the revenues, it speaks in here about the revenues, bullet item 2 under revenues, or the second bullet item under revenues, it says that what was estimated and what actually came in was less. And so my question is, have we adjusted those revenues for '05 to be more conservative based on last year's lesser amount?
The congestion relief part, we have adjusted. The $107,000, $107,000 in the Measure A tax revenue, we did not adjust because we did not have that figure at the time. The sales tax for Measure A is separately calculated from the sales tax that we get into the general fund. The general fund sales tax was relatively stable last year, so we were really surprised that the Measure A part
I'm
fell.
sorry, which one was stable?
There are two components to sales tax, and one is the general fund, which is the bulk of the money, and then a small part from this Measure A. Measure A is calculated on different sales than the traditional CITUS sales tax that goes into the general fund. We were surprised and did not adjust for the 04-05. We are hoping, and it's looking like that revenue, that sales tax, is going to rebound this year, but I don't know if it's going to rebound enough. But I think our savings on the serendipity contract and the phase out of the program will leave us at the end of the year in a fairly neutral state. I'm hoping at this time.
Will we be getting some kind of final? We've been getting progress reports on the SCOOT program and how that's gone in light of the election results and so forth. Are we going to get another one?
We can certainly come back to council with those.
Okay. And the last question I had, I'm not an accountant by any means, but I saw here on your chart the last amount, the $13,610, which you adjusted back in to have the. And I understand what you're doing there. You're trying to come up with the final 2004 fund balance.
Right.
But then again, we still have to. That 13,610 is an immediate takeout of the 05 amounts. Is that not true?
That's correct. It was for 05 services.
Right. Okay. So we're as soon as we go into the new year, then that figure of 20,000 will jump back up to about 33,000.
No, that's not correct, because we have a budget for the 05 year. This is just in the 05 year, which started July 1 of 04. These were expenses that were incurred prior to the start of that new fiscal year, but it was for services that lapsed over into the new fiscal year. So it's just part of all the services that we'll pay for with the budget that was approved by council.
Okay.
So it's not an additional amount.
Well, I understand that, but it does mean that you start the year with last year's 20,000 in the hole, and then you've already spent 13,000. So, in some sense, you're sitting there with a $33,000.
Well, you haven't already. You prepaid it, such as you prepaid rent. If you have 12 rent payments and you prepay the first one, then you're not down a month. You're just prepaid a month.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay.
Before we leave that, though, Matt, this is not an expense. This is a receivable. The footnote shown on the financial statements refers to it as a fund deficit, includes a $20,340 accounts receivable, which was not recognized. So you're going to get that revenue in 05. It'll be restored.
That's correct. I believe Councilmember Grocott was referring to just that $13,000 piece,
which is an expense.
That was an expense.
13 is an expense. The 20,000 is a revenue.
That's correct.
So it's not 33. You don't add them together. Is that correct, Richard? Or
no, because he's cutting, Mike. He's cutting in that chart.
No, I know.
He's starting out in the whole 95,000, and then he's making adjustments.
Well, my point is that the 20,000 is a revenue you're going to get from. Well, you pointed out here SF County Human Services.
They're two $20,000 figures, and I think we're mixing the two.
Right.
But the one you're referring to, Councilmember King, is the revenue that we will be getting. The $20,000 at the bottom of the page,
I'm not referring to that.
they're not the same number, but that's the negative fund balance
Correct.
that Councilmember Grocott was referring to.
Okay, Matt, did you have other questions?
Nope, I would
Ju-
move approval of consent calendar item 6H.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Christine?
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Mayor Teagle Doherty?
Yes, okay. The next item, 6I, which is the contract with Retail Real Estate Group to lease city-owned property at Holly Industrial Road. Matt, questions?
Yes. First, I just want to be sure to understand that what this contract would do is hire somebody to go out and find someone who would want to lease the property. Is that correct?
Correct. This is essentially assistance in marketing the property, and then any particular components of a proposal for a lease would come back to the city.
Okay. And the reason I pulled it is because I'm questioning whether I understand the desire to clean up our front yard, if you will, because that is right off the freeway. The property that's being talked about is at Holly and Industrial. We use it primarily as a storage yard. But I know with the committee that Mike and Tom sit on, one of the things they received was a report that shows all the surplus property that the city, or all city-owned property that's not being used with buildings or parks or whatever right now, and that was one of the sites. And I wonder if we're being, we might be painting ourselves into a corner with going ahead and developing that site and actually, putting out the invitation, if you will, for someone to come in and lease it and use it for a restaurant or whatever, because when this group looks at, there's a reason they were looking at all the surplus property. And in fact, I had a discussion with Brian Moore about this, that, for instance, in my business, when you're doing a remodel on a house, you might have a garage that after the remodel, it's a family room. And in terms of city-owned property, we might have, and I'm going to use an extreme case. I talked to Brian about this, and I don't see us doing this necessarily, but just to make the example, we sit here at City Hall in an older building that was built in the 60s, and we're right adjacent to a park. What if, just for instance, we decided we're going to use that property out there for City Hall so that we can open up this property for a park, so we have more room to play soccer or whatever. I'm not saying that's what we would do, but I'm saying if we go ahead and we take surplus property that we own right now, and before this group finishes their work, and lease it out, and it gets used for a restaurant, we've just painted ourselves into a corner. So that's my concern.
Laura, do you want to touch on the, just briefly, the East Side Specific Plan, perhaps, and the designation of this site within our East Side Specific Plan?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about the history of the site in terms of its desire to not only that area economic development component. This has been something that's been discussed, been in the work plan for quite a number of years. The economy impacted some plans a couple of different times, and it is currently believed this is the right economic time to move forward with that are in the site-specific landmark site, probably for some type of restaurant-related.
And so by leasing this property out sooner rather than later, that's going to generate money coming into the city in terms of revenues.
Correct.
Rather than having it sit empty. I can certainly understand your desire to kind of wait and see what happens, but...
Well, I bring it up because one of the things we talk about when we talk about doing things for the parks and fields and so forth is buying property. We already own property. And I would actually like to hear from Tom and Mike, since they sit on the committee, if they, they probably, I don't think you probably thought of this before, but that's why I brought it up. And
Well, it is part of the charge of our committee is to look at surplus property, but I don't quite see this as fitting into a logical field, having that kind of potential, considering dimensions and location. And I do see it as having high value to the city in terms of revenue. So I suppose it could go either way. However, I don't think I would recommend holding it off the market until this committee does its work. It just seems to me it has high value for the city in terms of revenue if we can find a good lessee and a good hallmark type company or use for the space. I just see high benefit to the city. So
Let me ask you this, Tom, if I may. Are you all looking at how land is being used that the city owns at other sites where it may not be?
We will be. We will be. We have, Barry has supplied us with information on vacant sites, basically.
And how about used sites? I mean, sites that have, say there's a, I don't know if we have this or not, but, say there's a storage facility or some kind on a site that could be moved perhaps to this site, and then it opens it up for a park.
You can go that way.
That's the kind of thing that I'm looking at. I'm not suggesting we put a park at Holly and Industrial.
Yeah, we really haven't, we haven't brought the process far enough to get into that kind of detail, but that's certainly possible if it's available for us.
Matt, one other thing to keep in mind is that we're considering leasing the property. We're not considering selling. So the city would retain ownership of the property or of the parcel. And any development that would be done on that parcel would actually increase the valuation of that piece of land. And, if there were an ideal piece of property that would come along 2 years from now, we may be in a position to actually trade property.
In other words, sell that piece of property.
Or exchange it for a piece of property that, at that point, we may decide that the loss of revenue would be, the benefit to the community would offset the loss of revenue on that potential site. So by improving the property, you're just simply increasing its value. And as well as, in this case, identifying an additional revenue stream to the city, which provides money, just like we have at Izzy's Steakhouse and Office Depot, a lot of the other developed parcels in town that are actually not empty, sort of weed-strewn lots. They're actually viable businesses, and yet the city retains the ownership of those parcels.
You might help clarify, Laura, do you know what the commission would be based on $15 a foot?
Yes, it would be approximately
I'm sorry?
approximately $32,000 if the land is valued at $15 a square foot.
Is that what? That's income per?
That is the commission.
The commission for this
So
real estate.
30-some thousand for commission. So should we make a deal, we'd have to pay the commission.
That's correct, but it's designed to come out of the rent. So
Yeah, but if the agreement says
out
that
of the initial rent.
if we sell the property, above reference commission structure would apply, which I suppose means that if we make a side deal on our own, we'll pay the commission.
That's correct.
To the consultants.
And that figure is also based on the higher commission structure, assuming that there is another cooperating broker involved in the arrangement.
Okay.
Don, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question, or I guess it was more a clarification. Tom, I think, spoke well of the fact that this particular parcel we should probably not hold up on, mostly because of its size, its dimension, because it's long and thin, its neighborhood, and all those things add up to what I call in my business the highest and best use. And the highest and best use for that parcel, in my mind, is clearly not for a park. It's just inappropriately located, and therefore we probably should not hold up.
Don, I just want to be clear, because you've said that and Thomas said that. I'm not talking about putting a park there. I'm talking about swapping uses. That's why I made the analogy. In my business, I might remodel a house, do a design for a house remodel, and I've got a two-car garage sitting here, but when I'm done with the remodel, where they used to have a two-car garage, they now have a family room, and the garage is someplace else because of what you said, highest and best use. This is not where you want your garage. Works out better. We put the family room here, put the garage over here. So what I was suggesting is that piece of property, and that's why I gave the example. Maybe it's extreme, but to get people to think. City Hall moves out there, and where City Hall sits becomes a park. That's looking at your available land that you own, that's your asset, and you say, what's the highest and best use for the community, not just in terms of dollars coming in, dollars going out.
But I think that staff has certainly been aware of that possibility for a number of years. There just hasn't come up the right opportunity.
Inga, just not to beat this to death, but it has been the policy of this council not to sell property. So nobody's talking about selling property. I know you've said that several times. They're not talking about swapping it. But I think we need to respect the East Side specific plan. This is the highest. This thing has been studied for over
15 years?
10 to 12 years is what I was going to say. And what we're talking about here is this committee, the field committee, will look at it, Matt. But I think they're looking for parks, and it is this committee's responsibility to look for the highest and best use, for the overall good of the city. But I think if we stay the course of, number one, not selling property. In general, we've said if you get the money and you cash it in, it's gone. At least this way we will get sustainable income for the city. And number two, the East Side Plan has studied this site almost ad nauseum, and it is really the highest and best use. And Don has already alluded to the problems of this site, but I think we'll have another opportunity when it comes in. Here's who the individual is. But I think we need to market the property sooner than later.
I'll defer to especially you and Tom, because you sit on the committee. But again, I would add the comment that when the East Side Specific Plan, I'm aware of the East Side Specific Plan. I know that this is considered a hallmark site for development. But the East Side Specific Plan in 1991, when it was written, we didn't know that we were having troubles with field use either. So, things change, problems come up, and you have to look at things anew. So, with that, I'll move approval of the item, 6H.
Sir, okay, it's been moved and seconded. Christine?
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
I didn't catch the second.
Tom Davids.
Okay. Councilmember Davids?
6I, by the way, not
6I.
Oh, I'm sorry. Aye. Item aye.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Mayor Teagle Doherty?
Yes. Okay, moving on. Next item, 7A, unfinished business. We're going to be accepting, hopefully, considering accepting the final financial report from the Industrial Road renovation. Richard?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, staff is recommending two actions. One is to receive the report, and the second is to make an appropriation to the Redwood Shores Skyway project pending final budget, which staff is preparing and will bring back to council at a later date. With that, the report is a follow-up to questions raised at the last council meeting, and invite your questions at this time.
Are there questions for staff?
Yes.
Okay, Matt.
The question I have first is just a procedural matter. When we're asked to accept these reports, theoretically, what if we don't accept it? What happens?
The reason this is brought back to the council is because of the high profile of the report. Typically, we are not asked to report back on every project, but this project has received a lot of focus and a lot of questions, a lot of interim financial status reports and updates. We, in the council, specifically asked for a report. I guess we could have not asked that it be received. We could have just said, here it is, but it didn't seem in keeping with what the council's inquiries had been in the past.
Yeah, Matt, it seemed to me at the last meeting, this was on the agenda for the last meeting, and you had some specific questions, and I think staff worked diligently to try to address those questions to make sure that your concerns were addressed and that your interests satisfied.
No, and I appreciate that. I'm just asking the question, not specifically necessarily to this, but we're being asked to accept a report. I'm asking, what does that term mean? Trying to probe for an answer there as far as procedure.
Bob, did you want to? Okay.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the work that, went into this. One of the things that has arisen for me from seeing the detail now is a concern that is on page, on the back side of the chart you gave us. And you list McTarry Engineering from 6/13/2003 through 9/1/2004 receiving $57,000 under this part of the project. Now, that was not, when I was asking at the last council meeting about what was going on here, he did not, he was at the podium and he did not state that he had any involvement in this part of the work. Now, this is listed as outreach coordinator, and when I go to the report that I put together a while back and actually asked a question on and did not ever get an answer on it, I put together a spreadsheet tracking the warrants paid to McTarry Engineering, and had shown with that under outreach coordinator, which is a specific part of his contract, it was overpaid according to what's allowed in the contract, which is, I think, 800 hours at $70 an hour, which is $56,000. Now, it was on Scoot, it was at $63,600. Now, if we just take the numbers from 10/17/2003 through 9/1/2004, which is the term of one contract year with McTarry Engineering, because his contract goes from 9/1 whatever year to 9/1 of the next year. That amount is an additional $45,612. Now, if I add those two together, I get over $108,000, $109,000 on a budget item that's supposed to be $56,000 according to the contract. So, under outreach coordinator in his contract, that's limited to 800 hours at $70 an hour. It's $53,212 over. I don't understand that. I don't understand how that can happen.
As I said at the last meeting, all of these warrants have been, the whole warrant list comes to council every time, every council meeting. We have informed the council as of the last time being December. We brought a report to council through October 31st, showing that we expected this expenditure category to be overexpended, $158,000. Council was, I believe, always knowledgeable that the outreach services were being conducted both for Scoot as well as for Industrial Road. And as we pointed out, because of the construction delays, because the project was extended, because of weather, because of soil contamination, we had additional need for outreach services to let the community know and the property owners and businesses along that corridor know why the project was delayed. So we spent the expenditures. They were approved by the city manager, as is proper and authorized to do, and the council was informed of all the expenditures, kept abreast of total estimated expenditures for the project. So I don't know what else I could have done. Perhaps if I had your questions earlier, I could have looked into the specifics. But we have answered the questions to the best of our knowledge.
Well, I knew that we had a construction management contract because we went through a whole process. I did not know that when we were paying McTarry Engineering, and I was watching the warrants and tracking this, I had no idea that he was getting paid, in addition to his construction management contract, for outreach coordinator. And I am really frustrated, folks, because we, as a council, we're elected by the people who pay taxes. And that money comes in, and it's our job to set budgets, to okay projects, to endorse, to okay contracts. And what's happened here is we okayed a contract with a fixed number for so many hours at a dollar rate on a contract that, quite frankly, by the way, we have not looked at since, I think, 2002. It's the last time we looked at that contract. But that aside, what's the point of us approving contracts, setting budgets, and so forth, if it's simply going to be ignored to the tune of, this is nearly 100% over budget, this item in the contract.
That was not a budget approved by council. That was the engineer's estimates of what each component of the project would cost. The budget that was approved by council was underspent by nearly $200,000. And if I might refresh the council's memory, the capital budget is approved for the life of the project. It is not approved, it does not lapse at the end of a year, as the operating budget has typically done in the past. Now we have a 2-year budget, so we have a 2-year lapse. But capital projects are approved for the life of the project. If we were to have every project that got extended because of weather or whatever, and say, well, the project budget is gone, we have no more money because the fiscal year elapsed, then we would have to go back to council every fiscal year and say, appropriate more money because the money you appropriated before has gone back to fund balance.
Richard, isn't it true that in any project we do within San Carlos, that generally there is what I call a contingency amount set aside? In general, it seems to be in this industrial road project, it was about 10% contingency, and it's basically saying, here's our best guess. I mean, Matt, I'm sure you get this all the time doing what you do, where you design a house and it goes out to bid, and then the contractor comes back to the people who are building it and they say, you know what, I didn't realize that I had to move this plumbing. It's going to be a little bit extra. I didn't realize that it was going to rain. We need to tarp the roof. It's going to be a little bit extra. That's how projects get done. I'm sure you advise your clients as well to set aside a contingency amount in case of emergency.
That's right, 10% for typical remodel
And
jobs.
what I would do is, I know you keep focusing just in on Mokhtari Engineering. I tend to look at this project as a whole. Did we come in under budget? The answer is yes. We came in significantly under budget, to the point where we're actually considering or reducing the assessment district to the property owners, which is, I think, a tremendous benefit. The second is the outreach coordinator. I think that was an absolutely vital key role in this project in keeping businesses from going out of business during that time. And I think it's to their credit. Now, was it within the original engineer's estimate of 800 hours? I don't know that any of us could have a crystal ball and kind of foresee if it was going to be 820 hours or whether it was going to be 603 hours. But the amount came in where it came in, and Industrial Road is done. It's a beautiful project. It's come in under budget. And I think from the comments that I've heard from both businesses as well as residents alike, everyone is very satisfied with the project. Now, I know that you're continuing to try to find out ways that we've, as a city, have been somehow taken advantage of by Mokhtari Engineering. And I'm sorry, I don't share that sentiment. And I would put it out to my fellow council members to see if indeed they feel like that somehow that something's run amiss with Mokhtari Engineering and the contract that was done. From the report that was provided to us from staff, you cited those numbers. They came in at $57,056 when you were citing the contracted amount of $56,000.
No, you misunderstood me. We have a contract with Mokhtari Engineering that goes from year to year. If you read...
But this doesn't fall under that contract.
If you read attachment C to that contract, it says that we will pay Mokhtari Engineering a retainer at a certain amount, and I think it totals up to about $97,000. Then it says we will pay the senior engineer so much per hour for so many hours, and it actually has a tagline that says, unless previously approved, it gives a max amount unless previously approved by the city manager. Then it gives an associate engineer, fixed hours, fixed rate. And the last item it gives is outreach coordinator, and it says 700 hours a year at $80 an hour, or it might be 800 hours at 70. I know it totals up to $56,000. It does not give any leeway for the city manager approving more or changing that figure. Now, we do have this report from Bob that talks about $20,000, and that's where we were when we did this contract. If the city manager wants to amend a contract, he's authorized to do so up to $20,000. A contract was amended, and apparently it was amended up to $53,212. That's far over. That's twice over the $20,000 that was allowed at the time. I am not picking on Mr. Muhtari. I am looking at our way of doing business as a city. And if we want to talk about departments, the last 2 years that we've had financial reports done by an auditing firm, Public Works has been over budget the last 2 years running. This year, the city manager's department was over budget. We set policy, we approve projects, we approve contracts, and we set budgets, and I would like to see us paid attention to. And that is my issue.
With that said, I'd like to move approval of the report.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve the report. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Christine?
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Mayor Teagle Doherty?
Yes. Thank you very much, Richard. Okay, moving right along. The next item on our agenda tonight is 7B. It is the review of City Council and appointed officials' Code of Conduct and Ethics Policy. As you will recall, back in, I think it was September, when this body adopted our Code of Ethics and Conduct Policy, we had at that point requested that all of our subordinate commissions and boards be allowed to have some time to take a look at it and make any comments to that before we just sort of carte blanche applied it to all of them. So, Jeff, would you mind giving us a brief staff report?
Absolutely. As you note on the staff report, I'm just asking for direction tonight and how you'd like to change this. I'd like to add to that recommendation, though, to ask you if you would, at the end of whatever changes, or if we don't come up with any changes, I guess we don't need to do anything, but if you do make changes tonight, that we just go ahead and consider readopting the policy, whether it gets referred back to the subcommittee or not, just so we've got a running baseline of where we're at with the document. As you indicated, Madam Mayor, this was adopted back in August. We've had the opportunity to send it out to all the commissions and boards and get feedback. We got very little. It's attached to the staff report. A couple of typographical comments that we've just gone ahead and made to the document, as well as just some general comment about why we may or may not need such a policy. But there are three significant comments. One, coming from an EDAC commissioner, would essentially be to completely throw out this policy, rewrite it. As it states here, I won't read the whole thing. If the council is inclined to do that, my recommendation to you would be to refer it back to the subcommittee, and they could start over. Based on the fact that we got very few comments back on this, it seems to me like people are fairly satisfied with how it is existing now. Another comment, and I think a good one, that came from EDAC was that under the Section 10, the council members and appointed officials' relation with city staff, somebody pointed out that, in fact, we were asking all boards and commissioners and council members to go ahead and communicate through the city manager. That was, I think, really written from the point of view of council and communicating through the city manager. I think we should point out in that section that it's entirely appropriate to have commissioners communicating directly with the department head who's staffing, the planning commissioner working through the planning director, for instance, and we can easily make that change. And then finally, they recommended from EDAC again, possibly considering some enhanced conflict of interest language in there. And this is an area that maybe we want to go ahead and refer back to the subcommittee if you want to enhance that. Basically, how the policy reads now is it just references the
the Political Reform Act and gives some general overview. And if you've got specific instances, you can contact the city attorney for more information. So that, in a nutshell, is the comments that we received back. Again, it was 2 commissioners.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there questions?
I have a question.
Tom?
Or a comment, rather. On the first issue, Jeff, I wouldn't want to fully rewrite it, but I wonder, is there room here for an executive summary? It is a weighty document, and chances are people aren't going to take the time to read it. And is there a way to pull out the real bullets and list them out as being the sort of the headliners of the policy? This could then be an attachment to that. I'm just
Correct. I'm sure we could go back and summarize it. I'd leave it up to perhaps the subcommittee to weigh in on whether or not they'd want to have it back, or just like staff to go ahead and sort of take a shot at putting together a summary, a table of contents, something that would help get people where they need to go.
I agree it's a little longer than maybe we started out to have. On the other hand, we as a subcommittee thought that it was an appropriate document and included the things we needed to include. The only worry I would have by doing an executive summary would be that I think you might, or there's a danger that you might miss something. And somebody's going to say, well, gee, I read the executive summary and I didn't read the rest, and gee, I really didn't understand it that way. And if someone is going to, well, if a commissioner is being asked to abide by these same standards essentially that the city council is, which I think is entirely appropriate, by the way, then I would also expect them to devote a half an hour or 45 minutes and read the darn thing, frankly. But it's up to, I don't care. I mean, not that I don't care, but I am indifferent to the fact whether we have an executive summary. I think in some cases it could be good, but in other cases it could be potentially abused.
Mike?
I would say that the proof's in the detail. I would not recommend an executive summary. I think either read it, or if the person feels it needs to be rewritten or doesn't want to read it, then don't sign it.
I would add also that I think for clarification, it would be nice to have a table of contents at the front end, just in case, you have a specific question. You don't have to dig through the 10 pages of small print. I think that could be done quite easily and amended either to the front or to the back, so that if they have a question, they can jump very quickly, and with a disclaimer and all. If all else fails, talk to our city attorney. I mean, if you think that what you may be doing might be a breach of the conduct policy or code of ethics, then it's better to ask first and do it later.
Go ahead and make that change.
I have a few questions, Jeff. First one is, and both my questions relate to the comments that were made by Mr. Thompson, Planning Commissioner, at a council meeting early on when we were looking at this. And he was concerned about having to sign a document. So my first question is, and I agree with him, by the way, does a person who is either elected or appointed as a commissioner of Planning Commission, traffic, whatever, do they have to sign this? What if they don't?
Actually, Jeff, maybe Don or I could, Matt, if you read the fine print, it's actually, they're only signing receipt. They're not signing acceptance.
Okay.
So that's all they're signing, is that they actually receive the document.
That goes to my second question. And that's, your answer doesn't answer my question. My question is, do they have to sign it?
If I may, there was no penalty built in if they choose not to sign it. Essentially, the council, by adopting the policy the way it is, has asked the commission to sign for receipt. And one of the reasons we do that is it helps ensure, from a staff point of view, that we're getting it out to all the various commissioners, because as you know, while council's stable, commissioners do come and go, and we want to make sure that we've given this document that you, the council, is essentially holding them accountable to ensure that they've had a fair opportunity to read it and abide by it before they encounter any problems as a commissioner.
However, if someone became a commissioner, they go through the whole interview process with us and so forth, and probably now we'll show this to them when they interview, I suppose, or when we consider them. But they go through the whole process, they become a commissioner, and then they say, we're not going to sign this. That's not cause for us to say, well, then you're no longer a commissioner.
Well, I think that it may be a cause for some of you, but that would be up to each of you individually to decide how that would weigh with you if somebody didn't want to go ahead and sign this, whether it was going to influence your appointment or not. One thing I can say to you is that Lee Thompson's comments were based on the fact that the old language required that you had received and understood the document. We changed it to just receipt.
Thanks. Thank you, Jeff. That's going to go to my next question, which is on page 4 of 10. The language is left in there because it says implementation of legal and ethical standards.
Can you zero me in a little bit?
Yeah. It's under implementation of legal and ethical standards on page 4 of 10. And then the last part of that says affirming they have read, understand, and agreed to abide by the City of San Carlos Council Code of Ethics policy.
That's a good pickup. That's basically a typo left over from an earlier draft.
Yeah, we need to make all the language to that effect parallel, so it says the same thing as it does on the last page, 10 of 10. I affirm that I have received it and read it, but or at least received it, but whether they understand it and so forth.
Yeah, good catch, Matt.
Let me just check, make sure that's all my questions, because I had something else highlighted here. Yeah, I did have one other comment, and I know we can't address, and Don says this all the time, you can't write law that addresses every single situation, but we've already had a situation where, and I'm on the last page, 10 of 10 again, the third bullet, last sentence. If the mayor is the subject of the complaint, the vice mayor shall be responsible. The vice mayor does all the things the mayor would do in an investigation. The situation it doesn't cover is the one we just had, where we were both involved.
Right.
What do we do then? Well, I know Inga took care of that, and it was worked out well. No complaints there, but perhaps we should add a little, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe Don's right. You can't address everything, and you just wing it at the time. I don't know. But.
Matt, Don and I can tell you, spent so many hours going through with Jeff through different scenarios, and how would this fit, like in this situation? How would this fit? And there's no way. And I guess I would look at it as, each council, if something comes up, they're going to figure out hopefully the best way to deal with it based at that point. And
Inga, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Since both of you are involved, I think the proof's in the pudding. You both handled it in a manner, at least from my perspective, that as one member, that was professional, ethical, and in abidance with this. So I think we can tweak. You sit here and tweak every possible, but the proof is in the action. And to both of your credits, it was handled. And I think if we start writing everything, we'll never get this thing going along.
Okay. Well, we've just been through it, so I thought it was worthy of at least bringing it up.
No, absolutely. Okay, are there other questions? And Jeff, just so that I feel confident about this has gone through every single commission that we have, correct? Twice. And staff has made sure that they know that we're looking at, making sure that this applies to all of them. Speak now or kind of, come back at some point when we re-review it, or and we'll consider changes then. But, okay, good. Thank you very much.
Well, Jeff, did you get what you wanted, the direction, or you wanted, because it's been approved.
That's right. And well, I think what we'd like to do is reapprove it based on the fact that we'll be adding a table of contents and making the change that Vice Mayor Grocott pointed out, as well as some of the grammatical changes. That way you've adopted the last clean version, and we can go from there if there's any future review.
And the important thing here, too, I think, is that we recognize that this is as good as it gets as of today. We may change it in the future. Other councils may change it in the future, and that's okay.
So are you telling us you're going to put a final draft under consent for the next council meeting, or you want us to approve it right now?
If you'd like, we could do that way, or because the changes there's just the two, and they're pretty minor.
I just asked the council, Bob, we're just saying review of city council.
It doesn't imply action.
It does not require an action. And we haven't noticed it of saying. The action itself is review of the council. Because my point was, this is already approved.
Yeah.
Right, it is already approved. It would just be
amend it.
I think that in terms of providing direction to Jeff, I think you've gotten the direction. Add a table of contents and clean up the grammatical errors, and send around the final version. I mean, I don't think at least I would hope that we don't have to go through like a lengthy adoption and approval process every time someone comes up and says, well, maybe we ought to tweak this a bit. Bob, do you think? Because it's a policy document.
Yeah, I think the changes that you're making are not really substantive. They're just correcting the text of what's there and has been approved, last August. So if Jeff, I think Jeff just wants a point in time where he can hand it out and say, well, this is the latest reviewed version. But I think the approved version was August of last year. Right. Yeah. And this is simply, this is the latest review, and you might have future reviews, but there is not a substantive change that I can see bringing it back for. Table of contents and taking out language that was supposed to be taken out last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's clerical.
Okay, super. Thank you very much, Jeff. Thanks for all your hard work on this as well. Speaking as one of the subcommittee members, we certainly appreciate your
Much appreciated, Jeff.
hours. Okay, under new business this evening, we have an introduction of an ordinance that's deleting sections 5.60.020 and 5.60030 of our San Carlos Municipal Code related to outdated vintage commercial advertising.
We have a speaker on the last item.
Oh, I'm sorry, Clint. I thought this was for public comment. I apologize. I just certainly does. I apologize for that.
Clint Miller, 2429 San Carlos Avenue. I would like to refer to the document, the ethics document, and I'm on page 2 of 10, and I'm looking at the mayor's section here, last item. It is the responsibility of the mayor to interpret and investigate complaints of potential violations of codes of ethics policy. My question is, when will you initiate an ethics investigation?
To date, I have not received any complaint, and but I will certainly take that under advisement and speak with our city attorney and find out.
I bring this up because of the events of last week when the newspapers had this fax plastered all over, these things all over town. Everybody's talking about this. You people are trying to ignore it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And let me suggest that you, as the mayor, when you came on board here, said the hallmark of your administration was to build trust and sense of community in this town. I think this is a fine opportunity to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Clint. Okay.
Madam Mayor?
I'm sorry. Bob?
Certainly it's for the mayor's consideration, but I'd ask you to take into account that the matter is pending right now with the district attorney. I think that was clear in the newspaper. And this is also a South County fire matter, so I'm not sure what the jurisdictional basis for the city would be in something like this. So please take that into consideration. We'll talk about it in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd plan to get with you as well. Certainly, but I mean, I would not like to have this be a debate between our city attorney and Clint.
I will direct you to page 8 of 10. Council members are not to be involved in processes of acquiring goods and services, and I think this falls under that.
Are you under
certainly?
procurement? Bullet item procurement? Is that
Procurement, correct.
Yes.
And this is obviously procurement.
Certainly,
goods and
certainly.
services.
And I will certainly get with our city attorney. Please keep in mind, this policy document was adopted in August of the most recent year. So, prior to that time, we didn't have a code of ethics or conduct policy document. So, Clint, I will follow through on this and with the city attorney. So, thank you very much. Okay, now item 8A, the outdated ordinance, introduction of ordinance deleting sections 5.60.020 and 5.60.030.
Back to 1931, when City of San Carlos adopted the mid section that's still in our code and only surfaced a couple of weeks ago when circulars were handed out about the PAMF project. And we were asked to look at it and say, well, we have some law against handing out handbills. My first reaction was, oh, we hadn't seen anything to our attention regarding 15, 20 years. However, deep in the recesses of our code, it's something that slipped by our spring cleanup in a year. That's sections 5.60.020 and 030 that talk about history of commercial handbill, both commercial section of the city, including city parking lots and also in residential areas. I know that some people would like to not see handbills on their doorsteps or those perhaps annoying landscaping on, but it's free speech and the court interpretation allowable for. So we're asking that you take action on this ordinance.
Questions for staff?
I have a question, Bob. Even though I understand the First Amendment issue and can respect it, but does that then bar the city from saying to someone who's going to pass out such information that they can't first get a permit or something like that? You can't do that either?
Well, we have permits required for peddlers. We have other means of control. So we say that with First Amendment issue, have the least amount of regulation possible. I think we already have protection for that.
How about something on the other side of the deal, which is when these things are passed out, whether they be, like you say, the little bag of rocks with the, the little message in there, or like these flyers, most of those ended up on the pavement in Wheeler Plaza and were a nuisance to the community in the sense that they became trash very quickly. Can we have anything in an ordinance that says that you put it out there, it ends up being trash, you clean it up, or you get charged for it, or something like
As
that?
I pointed out in the memorandum, there's already a state law right in the penal code. Makes it either misdemeanor or a infraction for littering. Our police officers, if they were called to, could take someone.
So we can already do that with
Yes.
us? Yeah, okay.
Bob, just very quickly, I know up and down the peninsula, many other cities, this is very consistent, in fact, to the point where I've heard people saying, well, you can't put flyers on windshields in parking lots and things like that. So this is fairly consistent with what's being done in neighboring cities as well.
That's right.
Okay. Okay. Is there any further questions? Is there anyone from the public here that has a question? I will entertain a motion to introduce this ordinance.
Madam Mayor, move to introduce ordinance number
1356.
1356, an ordinance of the City of San Carlos amending the San Carlos Municipal Code deleting sections 5.60.020, and 5.60.030, commercial advertising.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Christine?
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Mayor Teagle Doherty?
Yes. I have a quick question, actually, Bob. For something that's like a cleanup ordinance like this, can we put it under consent calendar, or do they need to come through for new business?
For the introduction of an ordinance, it must be on the new business section of your calendar.
And then for the actual adoption of the ordinance, that can go under the consent calendar, assuming that it's a unanimous vote or it's fairly.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. The last item on our agenda this evening is public comment. Again, each speaker will be limited to 2 minutes, and it's for items that are not on the posted agenda. Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to address the City Council? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
You're watching San Carlos Government Television, Cable Channel 27.